Alright, this is the Trompe l'oeil flower brick demo on how to build a little mushroom garden out of clay and make it look real-ish. So hopefully I do a pretty good job of this. I am working from Emerald's idea. I'm not going to make it exactly like what you've got planned. I'm going to deviate a little bit so that way you don't feel like you have to copy me exactly, because I want you to do your own work. I'm just going to show you a general idea of how I've put this together. We're just looking at my pencil, etc. I'm going to go ahead and just sketch out what I'm looking for as far as this design goes. I've got an idea of what you're doing, so if you change your mind and you want to do this exactly, that's totally fine. You do what you want to do. I'm just showing you how to put this together. So mushrooms. Mushrooms are really cute, and I think this is a really great idea. The big kicker is we've got to build narrow stems, and those mushroom caps are really going to be heavy. So first things first is I'm going to design the base. It does need to sit up off the table, so these shouldn't just be mushrooms sitting willy-nilly. They need to be on a stable surface, so that way you can sit it like a vase. It's a decorative vase. And I'm just thinking about how I want these mushrooms to look. I know your mushrooms that you were thinking about sort of have this trumpet up top and this wiggly stem. This can be done pretty easily. It's going to be a little difficult in the fact that you've got that narrow stem is not going to be terribly structurally sound. So putting it on this platform is going to be good, and it's also going to be important that we make sure that the base of our mushroom is as wide as the top needs to be, so that way it can hold its weight pretty evenly. I think I'm also going to add some little rocks, which I'll probably, when I get to the decorating point of the demo, I'm probably going to go in and add like a little like moss texture, so they look like they're molding a little bit, I guess, or maybe it's in a very damp place. And I'm definitely going to go in underneath these mushrooms and give them some gills, because I think that's a big part of what's going to make them look like real mushrooms. I'm just sort of marking out how I'm going to build each element. And for each stem, I do recommend coiling your piece up and working with clay that's just not, it's a little bit drier than you normally would work with. Like, it's not super squishy. And if you do that, you'll be able to build up pretty quickly, so that way you can spend time on your more decorative elements, because the structure isn't like super decorative, it's just functional. A big thing to remember as well, any closed off things, so those rocks I'm going to make little pinch pots for, any closed off things are going to need to be hollowed at some point, like they're going to need a hole or something poked either through the bottom of the plate or through the rock itself, so that way they aren't just air pockets and create little bombs. So I'm going to make my little mushroom sculpture. I'm going to do 2 mushrooms and rocks around it. I'll just set that aside, move everything out of the way. So I've got these slab molds. I think this is a pretty decent shape. It's not too large, and it'll support my sculpture. So the big thing about using this mold versus like just building it straight off the table is this mold's, got a lot more like structural weight behind it. So anything I put on top of it's not going to like push through. So as it dries, it'll be able to hold that weight. And when I take it off, it's not going to collapse or like sag in the middle where my heavy mushrooms are, because I've given it the support at the important time, which is, when it's drying or when it's wet. It's going to need more support when it's wet than when it's feasibly dry. So we're just going to put some paper towel on top of this so that way we can get it off afterwards. And I am going to just grab some clay to work with. I've already rolled out a couple slabs for this project, and just like we did with project 2, we're just going to roll out a slab and use that as our base. And remember what I said about canvas print in the last project? Really focus in on that, like laser focus, because the canvas print is really going to be an eyesore when we're trying to make, an alternative texture. It's going to be really out of place with whatever we're working with sculpturally. And really just hit it in all directions. And I really want y'all on this project to pay attention to those little details, because it's the little details that's really going to make this a convincing sculpture. We don't want it to look like clay. We want it to look like, a mushroom, or in Susanna's case, a takeout box. So making sure we finesse these finer points, it's going to help us in the long run. And notice I flipped it backwards. So I put that compressed side on the other end, because what I'm going to do is I am going to compress this other side now that I've got it flipped over. And because I've already compressed the back of it, I don't have to worry about that being an ugly texture when I pull it off. Okay, and just like before, I'm just going to take off that extra material. I'm going to take it off now while this clay is still pretty wet. That way I can, squish it back into a ball and use it for building. It's best to do it at this point in time when it's wet, because, why would you let it dry and have wasted material? This is still good clay. We can use it for other things. And I'm going to remember these edges when I pull this off. And I'm going to go back and touch them up. But for now, this is fine. This is just going to be the base for our sculpture. And we're going to leave it on this mold. Now, the big thing here with leaving it on a mold like this, and really any mold, if you're going to leave it on the outside of the mold versus the inside of the mold, as it's drying, it's going to shrink, and all those particles are going to contract. So if you leave it on too long, it will crack around whatever shape you've put it on. So keep in mind that you're going to have to pay attention to it, and keep it moist while you're still building, and pull it off as soon as it's, hard enough to hold the weight. And if you need to, grab a little, foam, like couch cushion foam, to put underneath. So I'm thinking about how I'm going to build this, and I'm sort of making some snap decisions here. And I was thinking I might just, build the top of that mushroom, but then I made my mind up that I'm just going to go ahead and build the stem first. So for this stem, I recommend coil building. It's pretty simple, and we can really build up fast, especially with how narrow it is. And what I'm pointing to is the base. So keep in mind, when we have tall, narrow things, we really need to make sure that base is solid. That it is not too thin at the bottom, because that's going to mess us up later on. If we make sure we've got a nice flared out base that matches the top of our piece, then we're going to have a better time building up, because we're not going to have to worry about it bending over halfway through. So just a little planning, because I am just going to be doing sculpture on most of this. I'm going to go ahead and just score the whole top. It doesn't need to be super smooth at this point, because I'm going to go back in later and really clean it up nice. score and slip your coils. Do not forget to do this. For this sculpture specifically, we are going to want to really be on that game, that scoring and slipping game, because if we do not do a good job, we will learn that we did not do a good job. It's going to be very evident. And make sure those connections are just fully as solid and together as you can possibly make them on this piece. I'm just letting that sit for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and roll out a few more coils so that way I can have them sort of set aside for my next move. And these coils can be pretty thick, and I do recommend just initially that they're thick, so that way when you start to get thin at the top, you have a little bit more material to support it. And later on, when we go into the sculpting phase of it, I'm actually going to take quite a bit off. So when we go back in later, I'm going to use my trimming tool, and I'm going to trim into it to give it some visual dynamics. So having a little extra material to shave off or trim off is going to be better for me to get this right. And I think that's going to be the kicker here, getting this right. And these things do take time, so do not rush them, but I think definitely try to get your base together and at least the general shape of your piece as much as possible for this first initial setting. And like I said earlier, make sure those connections are really thoroughly just put together as best as you possibly can. Like, really mean it when you go in and make those adjustments. Don't do it like halfway. And you can kind of see I've forgotten the inside of that particular mushroom, and I hope I go back and really touch that up, just because, and I do. Good job. Because if I don't really make sure that that base coil specifically is well attached, it could really wreck my whole piece. Because if I build it up all the way and I put on that mushroom cap and it's really top heavy, but I haven't really attached my base, what's going to end up happening is that mushroom cap is going to make it fall over, and all my hard work will just be completely, probably ruined. I might be able to save it, but I doubt it. Usually when something's fallen over and it's top heavy, it gets squished, especially if it's clay. So just making sure that those things are going to look pretty good is important here.